Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I have with us today a business strategist and leadership consultant, and I'm excited to jump into this conversation with Katie McManus. Business management, leadership, I mean, those are like the key things that we talk about here on the podcast. If you want to have a profitable law firm, you really need to get clear on your role in how you manage the firm and bring in the supports that you need. And then you need to be a leader and you need to lead your team, and everything starts at the top. So you lead by example, you lead by direction. And one of the biggest challenges that I find law firm owners have is the ability to let go and the ability to delegate and be able to allow someone else to hold the reins. So I'm excited to join Katie with this conversation and see what her thoughts are on the various challenges that she's seeing in the industry. So I'll read you her official bio real quick, and then we'll jump to a word from our sponsors, and we'll dive into the conversation. Katie McManus is a business strategist and leadership consultant. She works with attorneys and entrepreneurs who want to ramp up their revenue and create a sustainable business without sacrificing their freedom, stability, and sanity. Katie has a background in marketing, B2C and B2B sales, but she left her corporate life to begin her own business, Katie McManus Coaching. She's trained with the Coactive Training Institute in San Rafael, California, and is now a certified professional coactive coach and an associate certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Moshe.
It's my absolute pleasure. Now, Katie, we like to start with the easiest question ever because you don't really have to prepare for this one, and that is, tell us a little bit more about you. Our listeners don't know who Katie McManus is, so give us a little bit of your story and how you ended up being a business management and leadership. What did we call a consultant?
Yeah. So honestly, I kind of tripped and fell into it. I was a classic career hopper, doing everything from working as a sommelier in restaurants in San Francisco Bay Area. I did a little stint in acting before I kind of fell into a bunch of different sales roles, doing everything from selling video production services to solar energy to gym memberships to cybersecurity. I even did a little stint in a yarn shop where I was the manager. And a knitting teacher. And honestly, I had a lot of imposter syndrome all throughout my 20s. I had coaches that helped me through all these major career transitions. And I really, really wanted to be a coach. But I figured, who's going to listen to a dumb 26-year-old? And it culminated finally in me getting in a very serious car accident where I got a mild traumatic brain injury. And I realized, okay, well, I'm in my late 20s, like I'm working in a job that I hate. I might as well just go get trained so that when I'm ready to start this business, then I'll be able to go and do it. And I tried going back to work after that, and I hated my job. Where I could have faked it until I made it before, I just couldn't do it anymore, having discovered what I really love doing. And so I branched out and I started my coaching business. And I didn't realize I was applying everything that I had learned in my various careers, from sales and marketing to consulting with people tableside as a sommelier to helping teach how to use your hands in a very dexterous way to building my own business. And I started off as a dating coach for men because I lived in San Francisco Bay Area. I don't know if you've ever dated there. It's kind of brutal. Nope. Yeah. So I figured, okay, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fix these men and then they're going to be great to date. And honestly, it didn't work out. I got mostly female clients and one dude. And then I ended up working with most of my clients on leadership skills because how they were showing up in their work was directly getting in the way of how they could even have a personal life. So then I went back to coach training, got trained as a leadership coach again. And my business really evolved into helping other people start their businesses when my colleagues from coach training saw how easy it was for me to start a business and started asking me, like, wait a minute, how did you do that? Because the advice that they had gotten from the coach training program was absolute garbage. So I started showing them and I realized I loved that so much better. And I actually started off really working with coaches and consultants because I understood that model. And I found a lot of people in the legal industry would DM me and say, hey, listen, I know you work with coaches, but will you work with me too? Because you're describing the problems that I have exactly. And here I am today.
Awesome. So do you work with law firm owners in your business? Is that
I do. Yes. Mm-hmm.
okay?
Yeah.
So our audience is law firm owners, so we're going to focus there on your experiences with law firm owners specifically. And the truth is that the business environment in general is similar across the board. So a lot of the questions are global, but we're asking them specifically in regards to law firms. When you're working with your law firm owner clients, what is the number one challenge that you're finding they're facing and that you need to work through with them?
Yeah. So, I mean, the number one problem that they bring to me is that they don't have enough time to do everything. But when we dig under the surface, it's not that they don't have enough time, it's that they're not letting go of things. Right. So one of my clients recently just hired a bunch of new people within his business, assistants, bringing in a new partner and bringing in also someone to do operations. And one of the things that he was bumping into is he was in this mindset of, I have to figure out everything before I hand it off. I have to figure out how to train my assistant to be the best assistant possible before I bring them on. And it's backwards, because if you've never been an assistant before, you don't know how it's done well. And also, if you've never been supported by the right kind of assistant, you're not going to know like how to train them. So it's something that you really have to meet with the right talent and co-create what that role is going to be, and get really comfortable at acknowledging when things go badly and how you want them to go better. Rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just saying this isn't working. Likewise, knowing when you have to be the decision maker versus when you can just say, hey, listen, here's what matters to me, go forth and make the decision on your own.
Yeah, I love that. And the reality is that there's a fine balance between making sure that they understand how to do things the way you want them done, or the way that with not necessarily the doing, but the outcome, right? What is the final product that you want to see from that thing that you're delegating to them, versus here's the step-by-step process that you need to take to get this done. And I think that we spend a lot of time in the leadership role. We spend a lot of time worrying about how are they going to do it, when the reality is that should be part of their job, is to figure out how to do it. Now, you can, if you already know how it's done, you can easily show them how it's done. I mean, we encourage our clients to use tools like Loom and stuff like that, where you record the screen, you show them the step-by-step on your computer, you record instructions, and you hand it off. That might take you 5 minutes for a process that might take them 2 days to figure out what needs to be done. But you can literally do a 5-minute recording and hand it off. And then you can have a process for them to take that recording and turn it into a written process so that anybody can follow those step-by-step instructions. But at the same time, when you need to figure it out before giving it to them, that's a problem, right? Like, they need to be in that role hey, I don't know how to do this. So instead of me figuring out how to do it, you're going to figure out how to do it. And interestingly, in my business, it's something that I've been getting better at. I asked my team, who here is really comfortable with technology, wants to learn new technologies, and wants to be like the person that holds the torch when we try something new. Somebody raised their hand and said, hey, I would like to do that. And I've gotten that off my plate completely. Like, every time I'm thinking about implementing something new, I simply say, here, this is what I'm looking at. Take it, install it, try it, see if it's going to do X, Y, Z. And if it is, how is it going to be done? Write up the set of instructions and let's run with it. And it's been a complete game changer to me, staying up till 2 a.m, figuring out a piece of technology because there's no time during the day.
Oh, 100%. And, I think we don't credit the legal profession for how creative it's required to be. You have to constantly be playing out different scenarios in your mind, and that's exhausting. Okay. And then you're then trying to go and test out new technology and figure out the best way to use it and this and that and how it fits into your system. No, let's not tax your brain with more things when you're really here to be of service to your clients.
Yeah. And so, all right. So the number one challenge that they have is a lack of time. But when it really comes down to it, it's really not having clarity around the delegation process, and therefore being resistant to bringing on new help. Is that the only thing that causes that resistance that you see? Is hey, I need to be able to figure it all out and systemize it before I bring somebody on to hand this package to and say, here, this is what you're supposed to do. Are there other challenges or other reasons why somebody might be resistant to bringing on new help?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the personality of the person in question. Really, you can have a tendency towards wanting to control everything. There's also a tendency towards perfectionism. And there's also this fear that you're going to be labeled like the bad boss,
Mm-hmm.
and all those things, collaborate against you because, if you're trying to hire someone and they're not doing it right, it's hard for you to give feedback in a really constructive way. And so you really don't give it. And so you end up with someone who's supposed to be supporting you, not actually helping you in your work anymore. And you're just kind of stuck with them. And then you see it as a waste of money.
Yeah, let's dive into the specifics you just shared. I'm going to work backwards. So the bad boss one, right? If you have a fear of being a bad boss, it's interesting because one of the things that I talk about on the podcast a lot is that fear is the thing that it's the imaginary scenario that you've painted of what is the worst case that might happen. But the reality is that when you don't take action because of the fear, usually the worst case scenario is exactly what happens, right?
Yeah.
Like you're guaranteeing failure instead of having a possibility of failure. And what's interesting with the bad boss thing is, if you really think about it, how do you become a good boss?
Yeah.
It's through practice, right? It's through hiring people, having them report to you and stepping into that role and learning from your mistakes. Nobody starts off being a perfect boss unless they had experience doing that in a previous job. There's going to be mistakes you make along the way. You're going to say the wrong thing in a meeting. You're going to call somebody out when you shouldn't have, and they're going to, go home crying, the tail between their legs, and hand their notice the next day. That's going to happen. Right. And you're going to learn from that. And you're going to say, wow, I really need to be more careful with how I talk to people, in a meeting or whatever, or the feedback I'm giving them. They're actually people on the other side of this. I need to be a little bit more insightful to their emotions and all blah, blah, blah. Right. Like it's all of that is a learning process. So yeah, you may be a bad boss on day one, but if you strive to be a good boss, then that's going to happen over time with practice and having people who are working for you. So the only way to overcome that fear is to actually step into it.
Yeah. Well, to underline that, I think what a lot of people do is they bend over backwards to be nice.
Mhm.
And when you're trying to be nice, you're actually not being that particularly helpful because you're placating someone who may not be doing things correctly. Whereas if you try to be kind, I love Brené Brown's definition of what kindness is. It's being crystal clear. Right. And one of the
Mhm.
ways I train my clients to be crystal clear and kind with their teams is to address problems and crossed wires in this way, where you sit down with them, you start off by celebrating the things that you like about what they did and seeing the effort behind it and really championing them. And then you go into, okay, there are a couple things I would like done differently in the future. And here is why. Here's the impact it has at the end of the day that, I maybe didn't communicate very well to you in the beginning. And then you communicate that. And then you say, listen, this is an iterative process. You're going to do this a couple more times. There are going to be more things that I'm going to pinpoint that need to be done differently. It doesn't mean you're failing. It just means we're learning how to work together. And with a framework as simple as that, to frame any conversation where you're offering corrections, I mean, you're offering immense growth to this person, but you're being so kind because you're being crystal clear.
Yeah, I love that you share that. One of the resources I share on the podcast a lot when it comes to leadership and team development is a book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And that's the premise of her entire book. Like, and she paints the picture at the beginning. I mean, it's really fascinating when you first dive in. Like, she draws you in with the story about her person working for her. I don't know if his name was Bob or Dan. I forget what his name was. But essentially, basically, she had this person who was quite talented and should have been able to do his job well. And she asked for a deliverable, and he gave it, and the work was low quality, and she had to go back and redo it. And she went back and fixed it up, and was hoping that the next time that he submits something, it's going to improve. Like, somebody with practice should improve. And he continued to turn in this low quality work, and it got to the point where she got so frustrated that she finally called him in to let him go. And he said, "Why are you letting me go? I've been doing everything I'm supposed to do." And she basically said, "Well, your work is low quality, and I need to keep going in and fixing it." And he turned around and he said, "Well, if you had told me what I did wrong, I could have corrected it. Or if you had pointed out what the problem was, I could have gone back and fixed it." And that was already at the point of no return, where she was letting him go. But it became clear that there's a better way to manage than to just say, "Okay, I'm just going to do it myself." And it's really important to be honest and upfront. And and it's radical candor is all about, how do you provide direct criticism without making somebody feel badly, in a way that it's constructive, in a way that they now can learn from that and become better at their role. And that's what true leadership is. It's not, "Oh, I'm going to oversee what you do, and I'm going to correct your mistakes." It's, how do I turn you into the best version of yourself while you're here? Somebody who was a guest on the show, and I don't remember who it was. And by the way, before I go into that, Kim Scott, Radical Candor, we're going to link that up in the show notes. So there'll be a link to it right below the description and the podcast player that you have, or you can go to profitwithlaw.com for the full blog post of this episode, which will include all the resources we mentioned. And the other thing that you should know is that we have a book club. It's absolutely free, a book club for lawyers. One of the books we read in the book club is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. The book club is currently, at the time we're recording this, reading Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz, who was a keynote speaker at our Law Firm Growth Summit recently, and spoke about this specific topic. So if you want to join the book club, all you got to do is go to profitwithlaw.com/book club, profitwithlaw.com/book club. We'd love to have you in there. We read a book every 2 months. We start a new book, and it's run by Mimi on our team. She's our podcast producer. She also runs the book club and hosts a call. I think it's once or twice a month, to discuss the book that's being read, but also gives you direction as to what we're reading when, so that you have a timetable, so you have kind of some accountability about your book reading, which is really cool for those of us that want to grow and understand that book reading is part of that growth. Many of us love to read, especially in the legal community, and entrepreneurs love, many entrepreneurs love to read. There's some entrepreneurs who hate to read, but definitely something that you want to check out. So I was going to jump into a story, and I don't remember what it was. So I'm going to turn the tables.
Can I bounce off of what you were
just?
Yeah,
of course. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the things that a lot of lawyers don't recognize is that there's a requirement for a certain level of emotional intelligence when you're managing other people. Because let's face the reality of what your job is. You're constantly going to battle on behalf of your clients. You're having to think out strategies so that you can win, and so the other side can't gain an advantage on you. That does activate your nervous system, whether you like to admit it or not. And of course, in addition to that, you're dealing with deadlines constantly, court filings, court dates, when you have to get certain papers back to the other side. It's incredibly hard to check in with yourself when you're in that state of this has to get done or else we're failing for our client, to then manage your emotions and that tendency towards martyrism, where you're like, screw it, I'll just do it myself, to turn around and give feedback to someone who's there to support you and doing it slightly wrong. So just have compassion for yourself. It is hard to do, but it gets better with time. Yeah,
I love the term martyrism. I never used that, but it's really true. Like, that's what's that?
I think I just made it up, but yeah.
But I love the idea of the law firm owner is, when you take it back for yourself, then you're turning yourself into a martyr, which in some way people want, right? Like our ego desires us to be the knight in shining armor, to be the savior, to be the one who's going to go out there and sacrifice ourselves for the good of others. And it's almost like we have to fight our own internal inclination to do something in order to succeed. And the truth is that a lot of business growth is that. A lot of business growth is us butting heads with our survival instinct, and recognizing that logically we have to overcome that. But emotionally, it's hard. It's hard to overcome that. I want to go into the other thing that you shared, which was perfectionism, right? Like when somebody feels like, if I don't do it, it's not going to be done right, or it needs to be done perfect in order for this work to be good or okay or done. And it's interesting because typically in any regular business coaching conversation, we would say done is better than perfect. And really try to hone in on that idea that, look, let's just get it out there. Let's just delegate it, have them do it. And if it's not perfect, give them critiques and it'll be better the next time. Interestingly, when it comes to law, first of all, attorneys are trained for perfectionism. Like, that is what you learn in law school, is like, you need to get every word right and it needs to be perfect. And if there's one word wrong, it could have a completely different meaning in a document, and boom, you've opened yourself up to litigation, and you've got a problem, or you can turn someone else's document into something that you can poke holes in because of how they wrote it. So there's two things at play here. Number one is your own training that's been basically, hammered into you that you need to be a perfectionist. And then the second thing is the reality that when it comes to certain parts of your practice, there actually is a need for perfectionism. And that's lawyers have a unique challenge when it comes to this conversation of perfectionism. And I want to dive into that because I think it's something that we may gloss over and take for granted. And the reality is it's not so easy for our listeners to get around that. So let's talk about first this idea of things need to be perfect when you're like, let's say you're preparing a document, right? So they're drafting a document, sending it off for signatures. That document needs to be perfect, right? There is a way for you to create processes for a review where you still can delegate the activity and only own the final checkpoint and not have to still own the process. And then when you take it back, you find a problem, get in the habit of providing feedback and getting the person to fix it, even though you can easily do some corrections. If you do the corrections, they'll never learn.
Yeah.
So if you highlight the mistake, send it back and have them fix it, then review it again, it'll take you more time in the first couple of times, but it'll be the last time you have to make those corrections.
Yeah.
And if not, then you might have somebody in the wrong seat, right? You might have, if somebody's not learning from their mistakes, they might not be the right person for that job. So when it comes to the perfectionism side of the work, you have two things that you need to do. One is you have to identify, where do we require perfectionism and where is done better than perfect okay? Because there are certainly parts of your practice that done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
It's only the places where it's perfectionism is court dates and hearings, right? Like, we can't miss those. So if you're not putting them on the calendar, if you're missing done is not better than perfect. It needs to be perfect. It needs to be right. You can't put the wrong date or the wrong time on the calendar and I say, oh, done is better than perfect.
Right.
So when it comes to court dates, court hearings, drafting of documents, in all of those scenarios, then absolutely you have to have a mechanism in place to require perfectionism in your firm. But there's a lot of other places and a lot of other roles people hold, whether they're managing the office, whether they're in charge of billing. If somebody sends out a bill that has an error on it, that can be fixed. Yeah, it might piss off a client, but you can fix that by simply saying, "Oh yeah, that's our mistake. We'll fix that, and we'll also do something to make sure that we don't do that again." And then you give that feedback. You don't have to review all the bills before they go out. There are many law firm owners who do, and that takes 2 days for you, and it delays your billing process, makes your team crazy. Like, you shouldn't even have to have your attorneys reviewing the bills. If they're not getting the feedback of how to write their notes properly, and putting them in right the first time, so that you can have a low-level employee go out and churn out all those bills and send them out, then there's a problem with the process in your firm. And I think that that's something we need to get really clear ourselves on. Like, where are we willing to allow for lack of perfectionism, because that can really move the needle on the growth of your business. On the other side of it, I'm going to get Katie, I'm going to give you a chance to really weigh in here and give us your thoughts. But on the other side of it is the part where it's been hammered into you, perfectionism. And that's where you need to recognize that there's two roles you play. One is that of the attorney, and the other is that of the business owner. And you really need to get clear which hat you're wearing. When you're the attorney, then perfectionism is your job.
Yeah.
But when you're the business owner, perfectionism is your nemesis. And you really need to understand which role you're sitting in, and own that role, and recognize that in one, perfectionism is my goal, and the other, if I'm achieving perfectionism, I'm doing something wrong. And that's really the most important thing that you can do from an emotional mindset standpoint, to really hone in and understand what might prevent you from growth. Katie, over to you.
So whenever I talk about perfectionism, I'm reminded of Parks and Recreation, and that character Ron Swanson, who has that saying, like, I never half-ass anything. I always use my full ass. And I'm a full believer that, yes, you have to have perfectionism in your legal work. However, in your business work, half-assed is better than perfect. If your team is making a push to be on Instagram, a half-assed reel or a half-assed grid post or a half-assed story is way better than not showing up. Because here's the thing, no one can hire you or your firm unless they know that you exist. You have to tell people that you exist. You have to tell people that you can help solve their problems. You have to be present and top of mind for them constantly if you're hoping to get their business. And if you hold yourself to that standard of perfectionism, like, I'm sorry, I've never made a perfect reel. Okay. I haven't seen a single creator out there, except for maybe Elise Myers, who talks about ADHD, who has done a perfect reel. And yeah, I mean, there's a huge tendency to want to make it perfect and to do this, but here's the thing, that's going to make it so much harder to put out, especially if you're having to deliver lines or do some acting or dancing or whatever it is that you're wanting to do. On LinkedIn, for instance, one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they're like, okay, well, I have to go on LinkedIn and I have to prove to people that I'm smart. I have to show up and I have to show that I'm an expert in what I do. And that's actually the worst way you can show up on LinkedIn. Because on LinkedIn, everyone pretty much assumes that everyone else is smart. What you want to do on LinkedIn is you want to set everyone else up to appear smart in your comments. You want to share something that's so easily understandable and relatable that people can hop in the comments and share a story back or ask you a question and not feel like an idiot. And if you're trying to be a perfectionist, if you're trying to use all the right words in that post, guess what? You're failing.
Yeah. It's interesting that you started with sharing us the thing about reels. I was sitting here thinking, I don't know if our audience is worried about making a perfect reel. I think that they're worried. They're wondering if there's a place for them to post it all. I don't know. I think that many people are not active on social at all regarding their business because of how am I going to be perceived, or what what is that going to look like? But it's a great example of where done is better than perfect. Like, putting something out there is better than not putting it out there at all. And there are those that will fight. They'll fight to the death, saying, no, if my hair is not perfect, my makeup's not right, I can't put my face on camera and put myself out there, because then people are going to see the real me. They're not going to see the professional me. And it's the same. I mean, it's kind of why, like, the cover art on my podcast has a t-shirt on it, right? Why am I showing up to the legal community in a t-shirt? Because I think that you're one of the things to overcome as a law firm owner is to recognize that there's a level of professionalism that is ingrained in you that needs to kind of be discarded if you're going to be a good business owner. And you need to throw off your suit and tie and and don a t-shirt sometimes as
Yeah.
a business owner. You just need to let go, you need to relax, you need to chill out and just allow people to have fun and allow people to do their job in a fun way, and you need to show up that way to the world also. Like when somebody's going through divorce, do you think that they want a stuck-up attorney, or do you think they want somebody who they can relate to and can see as a mom of kids, and they're a mom, or they're, or can see as a imperfect human, like, oh my gosh, you went through a divorce too. It's, cool. Like that actually helps them decide to use you, not hurts you in the process. So being personal and being out there and being relatable is actually a good thing. I mean, I guess it depends on your practice of law too, right? Like if you're not consumer facing and you're business facing and you're looking to get, multi-billion-dollar mergers done, then, hey, forget everything I just said, but you're probably not listening to this podcast too. So,
Well,
but
I think to your point, there's such a value in going on and doing some empathetic marketing where you're sharing some of your own story, or you're sharing the struggles of what your typical clients go through, obviously not divulging any confidential information. Likewise, there's value in just going in and being a commentator. There are some lawyers who are showing up brilliantly on social media right now with the whole FTX scandal. And of course that's current right now. It might not be current when this goes live. But the thing about those people is they become memorable because they had an opinion at a moment. And maybe I don't have need of their services, but I remember them, and I remember that they're relevant to that type of law. And if I'm talking to someone who's having issues with that, I'm obviously going to connect them.
yeah.
So, and to your point, showing up in a t-shirt, that does make you stick out from a sea of suits. It makes you more memorable.
Absolutely. But I need to get more present on social. Like I don't post enough. My team posts for me. We release a podcast, stuff like that. But me showing up as a human, there's always room for improvement there. Even in my own business. So definitely not talking from the root from a tower that I've built and saying, hey, this is, see what I've done. I'm in the trenches with you guys when it comes to this stuff. Katie, we are nearing the end of our time together. So there's two things I like to do when I close out an episode, and this has been great, by the way. Really good, valuable stuff for people to just take actionable action on. And just remember, you got to just get out of your comfort zone. Don't hide from fear, and just take action. Imperfect action is better than no action at all. Two things for you. One is where, if somebody wants to learn more about you, they want to take a next step in connecting with you, where do you want to send them? Where should they go? And the second thing is, if you can leave one parting piece of advice to our listeners, bottle up all of your smarts into one takeaway from our talk today. What would that piece of advice be that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, well, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I think in the show notes, there's going to be a link to a business growth evaluation call with me. It's a 30-minute call that I'm happy to offer to anyone who listens to this podcast. And of course, you can find me at katie@katiemcmanus.com. That's my email. And then a parting bit that I would like to leave with everyone is to remember that, yes, like your firm needs to be profitable. Your firm absolutely needs to bring in money. It needs to have happy clients. It needs to have a team that sticks with you. But remember your personal life. There's a cost. If you are the person doing everything in your business and it's still profitable and you're making it, there's a cost to your family. There's a cost to your relationship. I think so often it's easy to justify the late nights because you have to get it done. You have to justify going back and fixing something yourself because the buck stops with you. But I don't think at the end of your life, you're going to lay on your deathbed and be like, oh gosh, I should have corrected more briefs. You're going to wish you'd had more time with your kids and your spouse and your friends and your family. And so it's not the end all be all to make the most amount of money doing the most amount of hours in your work. There's a balance that needs to be struck. And don't forget that.
Yeah, man, we missed the boat on the topic for today's conversation. We should have talked about work-life balance. But to Katie's point, even in my business, when I started my business, my goal was to not have somebody dictate my commitment of time, and to be able to be present for my kids at every juncture, whenever, and on my choosing, right? Like my kids are having this going on. I want to be there for it. And there's different things, like my wife wants to be there when they're, opening the holiday store in school for them to buy presents. Like, that's not the kind of thing that I need to be there for, but I'd like to be there when they get off the bus at 4 o'clock and hang out with them and play with them at, when most people are sitting at their desks still working until 5. And then commuting home. So I set up my business. I have my office out of my home because commuting is a waste of time. I have grown more slowly in my business. I've sacrificed the speed of growth so that I could be present for my family. I have expedited onboarding team members, sacrifice profitability to put an emphasis on delegation in order to facilitate the life that I want to lead. And I'm only sharing this with you not to pat myself on the back, but I'm only sharing this with you to give you some ideas for yourself on what's possible. And, even because so many people sit in there and they're like, oh, I'm too early in the process. When I have $1 million firm, when I have a $2 million, $10 million firm, and when I have an office manager who's running everything, when I've completely handed off every single responsibility of mine, that is when I will have time to spend with my kids. That's when and before you know it, your kids are in college and you haven't got there yet. And the reality is that you can make that decision on day one. You can make it from the moment you start your firm. One of the partners we work with very closely is a company called Get Staffed Up. You can go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up, and you can get $750 off the initial fee to onboard somebody. They have virtual assistants that are offshore, English speaking professionals that you can bring into your business, and it costs you less than $2,000 a month for a full-time employee. There isn't an attorney out there who has a law firm that should not have a Get Staffed Up VA, because even when you open your doors, you're like, well, I don't have any business yet. Perfect. That is the perfect time to start your delegation. That is the perfect time to bring on your first employee at a really inexpensive cost. And if you don't have enough money in the bank to support that, you probably shouldn't be starting a business. You need to have a runway. You need to have capital to invest. I did a great talk at the last Law Firm Growth Summit, and maybe we'll share it here on the podcast at some point, all about understanding capital and understanding investing in business. One of the biggest misnomers is I can start a business with $100 because I can get a website and a phone line and a business card for under $100. And the reality is that no, you have to be willing to invest in your business at every juncture. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The expense always comes before the fruit of that expense. You're always going to hire somebody before you can actually collect money for their work. And that's going to, that just gets bigger as you grow. That need to invest to create more is going to happen at every stage of growth, and get used to it and start it right from day one. And you need to be willing to invest in people and in marketing from the get-go. And the biggest thing that slows people down is not having that in place. So I love that you went there with the work-life balance. And normally, by the way, we close out the show after you share those two things. But I'm so passionate about this subject that I think it's crucial to talk about it here, to share it. That this is really the key, not to success, but the key to winning at the game of life. Because it's not about, like, why did you start your law firm? Why are you in this? And 9 times out of 10, part of it is going to be to create more money so that you can have more time, so that you can spend that time with somebody. And the reality is you can make the choice to spend that time with them now. And you can do that without creating more time and without creating more money by simply making a decision about how you're going to spend your time. And I think that's like the biggest, we did talk about a lot about delegation and leadership and all of that. And I think that, ultimately, and the example I use with my coaching clients is, and by the way, if you are interested in working with us, we have an elite law firm coaching experience to help you with your growth. And you can check out more details about it at profitwithlaw.com/elite. But what I do with the coaching clients is I explain to them, like, if you opened a grocery store and you had 20 aisles in it and you just bought one crate of apples and put it on the shelf and you say, I'm open for business, right? First person who needs apples is going to come in, is going to buy apples. Next person comes in is going to buy apples. Anybody who comes in looking for diapers or formula or meat or chicken is out of luck, right? They're going to walk in and say, oh, you're out of inventory. I'm going to go find another grocery store, right? And then ultimately what's going to happen is that they're going to go and go to your competition, right? They're going to go and shopped in another store, and your people are your inventory. And if you don't line your shelves, if you don't put people in place and create that inventory, then that's going to mean that you can't serve everybody. You can't serve the people who are coming and need you, and they're going to go somewhere else. So the name of the game is hiring people as fast as you can, as easily as you can, to grow your law firm. All right, Katie, this has been fun.
Can I jump in with one little mind reading thing? Because I know there are some listeners right now that are like, okay, great. Yes. But I'm just going to wait until I hit that first million or that first 2 million, because it'll be different for me. And then I'll switch. But like, remember, there's this tendency as humans to just move the mark constantly and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. If you start that mentality now, it's just going to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Special. All right, Katie. This has been a great conversation, folks. We're going to link everything up in the show notes. And if this episode has been fun for you, if you've enjoyed it, if you gained from it, we'd love it if you came back again. So if you're not already subscribed to our show, make sure to hit the follow button or the subscribe button in your podcast player. We're here at least once a week, every Thursday, with a guest interview. And we're always bringing our A game. And we hope that you enjoy the content. If you've been listening to us for a while, we thrive on ratings and reviews. Go into your podcast player, leave us a rating and review. We'd really appreciate it. Every once in a while, we run a promotion for and give away stuff to people who have left a rating and review. And we'd love to be able to include you in that. Take care. We'll catch you next time.